You want to know more about the power of taking action and setting goals? You're going to want to listen to this. So as many of you know, I this year have started really investing myself into building my business. Not even so much this year, but now. So as you already know, if you've been listening to my information, you've been watching my videos, I lost my job back in February. And yes, I could have very easily gone down a rabbit hole of despair and frantic desperation, but I'm just not going to do that. I haven't been this bad off in a long time, but I'm not having a problem seeing the positive side of things, which is one of the best things I can say about my scenario. You know, case in point, I have a house. You know, I have a roof over my head. How bad could things possibly be? I have, you know, a job with the military, flying helicopters, even on a part-time basis, but still pays pretty well. How bad could things be? I don't have a job right now other than the flying job, but I have a clean, polished product, my software, that is sellable and it's ready to go right now. How bad could things be? So it's very important to go into any scenario, especially one where you're trying to create a new future, because as we know, a lot of people will walk into something with high expectations, with a very motivated mindset, and the minute they face a little bit of setback, a little bit of a speed bump, it immediately deters them and they turn around and they head back the way they came from. You know, I know everybody's typically heard the whole resolution case where most people will abandon their New Year's resolution by the end of January or February, and that's a sad thing, but I do believe that that's true, because every year, right around the beginning of the new year, I start to see an uptick in participation at the local gym, and before long, it tapers off, and I mean before long. You will see people coming in there, people who look extremely unfit, and I understand it's a very difficult thing to really shift yourself into a new positive mindset, to start putting action, energy, and effort into this new mindset. It's difficult, it's challenging, and that's why they say that this is not for everyone, or if it was easy, everybody would do it, because that's absolutely true. But one thing I do know is that anytime you walk into something, you have to have determination. You have to be willing to take setbacks and deal with frustration, and most of all, you need to be willing to deal with the stress, because there's no way around it. You're going to deal with stress. You're going to deal with frustration and setbacks and no's and resistance and even hostilities. And I could tell you, just the whole cold calling thing, trying to sell my product and getting hung up on, it's not great, but I've just learned to just laugh it off, you know, just laugh at it, and that's it. Just mark that line down as red, not interested, moving on. Because you know what? When the product becomes large enough, those people will look back and say, hey, and maybe they won't even remember that moment, but they could end up becoming customers anyways through a different routing system in the universe. Who knows? But one thing I will absolutely say is, if you are going to put a plan into action, you need to set goals. Now, I've listened to a lot of motivational speakers. I've read a lot of motivational books. If I would turn the camera around right now, you would see that you're actually surrounded by bookshelves that go up and over, and they're just loaded with books on, you know, there's a lot of history and politics in there, because that's what I majored in college, but at the same time, there's also a lot of business and motivation. You know, there's books over here on motivation, on stories of people's successes. And one thing I can tell you is everybody seems to have the same outlook. They all say the same thing. You need to have goals. You need to be determined. You need to have perseverance to be able to make these things happen, which means the bottom line is you need to set goals and have objectives, and you need to be able to find a way to follow through on those things. So, of course, a great deal of organization is going to be required. You know, this is the most I've poured myself into my business at any point throughout history, and I already feel certain things within me changing as a result. You know, before I was like, oh, I'm a business owner, but it wasn't really ready to sell. It wasn't ready to push. Even though people would use it, it wasn't ready to sell or push. But now that it is, I'm learning, okay, you need to be more conscientious of spending here. You need to be more conscientious of feedback there. Any tweaks, changes to software that you make, it's got to be very deliberate, because you need to know that what you're doing can take funds away from the more important changes. It takes a development team away from the more important changes. It's got to be something that's very pragmatic, that works out for the customer, that's not just to satisfy what you think would be a cool feature to have. It's got to be something that's practical. It's got to be something that's useful, and that's how I end up making my decisions now. So what I would say is, if you need to learn how to set objectives, you need to put action plans in place, write things down, learn your schedule, take time away from things. Now, it's easy for me in some sense because I'm a bit introverted, you know. It's also easy for me in some way because I'm currently in a breakup, I guess you could say, or a relationship that's on hold while it's working on itself. What I have is time right now, and time to dedicate to certain things, but that also comes with a conscientious choice. You know, that comes with a choice of how I want to spend my time, because I very easily could be somebody who's, you know, watching TV right now, who's out screwing around or out shopping or out doing something or hanging out with friends or going to get some beers or what have you. I could be somebody who's traveling. I could be doing 1,000 other things right now, but instead what I'm doing is, in between working on the business, I'm also sitting here making videos on a Sunday afternoon, because I know that I need to take a very serious stance on how I spend my time. I need to make sure that I'm dedicating the time to be able to put things together, and that's exactly what you need to do as well. So when you're trying to set these goals and you have something specific in mind, what I've realized the best thing that you could possibly do is write things down. Write things down, and that is what all these books will tell you. That's what all these motivational speakers will tell you, is set goals, write them out daily. Now, that is one thing that I absolutely do is, number one, I set goals and I write them daily. Okay, now these goals don't change on a day-to-day basis. Of course, if I say, I made 40 calls yesterday, today I'm going to make 50. I made 50 calls yesterday, today I'm going to make 100. That is a goal that can change day by day. But the biggest thing is stepping up to the plate, making sure that I'm putting myself out there, making those calls, because nobody's going to say anything positive to reinforce me unless I give myself that kind of exposure. Okay, so write things down. Everybody says write these down. Write down your goals. Second, visualize. Really sit there and give yourself 15 minutes. Now, for me, I even admit this is a difficult thing to slow myself down to be able to do, to actually sit there and say, okay, well, I need to dedicate, 15 minutes to meditating today, but first I got to get to this, and the second I got to get to that, and I got to respond to this, and I got to make sure that I post this to social media. All that stuff can wait. All that stuff can wait, because it's so important to first center your mind, know what track you're putting your brain on, and then let it go. So if I say today's the track of I'm dedicating myself to this, I sit there, I focus, I know what my goals are. I say, okay, today I'm going to accomplish this, I'm going to accomplish this, and I'm going to accomplish this. And as long as I've accomplished those three things, I have stayed on track. I've accomplished my goals, and I've moved this much further in the direction of progress. And if you go above and beyond and you do more than that, fantastic, that's great. But it's so important to just center your mind first. So write out goals, visualize things to get yourself on the proper track. And then, of course, organization. Organization is huge, right? Because let's just say tomorrow I'm jumping on a flight to go to Germany to visit my son. But before that, I have time from, whenever I finish the gym in the morning up until the point that I go to the airport at around 2 p.m. I have all that time in the morning and early afternoon to be making calls. So today, part of my goal is to write out my list of calls, so that way tomorrow I'm not in the moment hunting for leads. I'm literally just going off a list of 50 numbers, 100 numbers that I've already got that I'm going to compile today. So you have to dedicate the time. It's very important to have a plan of attack. Now, if you've ever played Risk, or you've ever played the game Axis and Allies, or you've even ever played the game Civilization, which I absolutely love, you know that a big part of those three games is strategy. Now, there's a lot of games on strategy. Chess is a huge game on strategy, right? But I don't play enough chess. I did as a child. I don't play much anymore. But when I look at a game board and I'm able to see all my resources, and I'm able to make certain take certain chances and make certain, gambles with my resources, and I could see where everything is, I could see where everything's going, that helps me to have this very holistic approach to how I'm going to set up my outcome. And that's exactly what you need to do too, is really sit there, think things out. How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? Well, the best way that you can really organize all of that is to organize it on paper first. So set your goals, visualize, and then organize your thoughts. Okay, write it out on paper. This is what I need to accomplish today. This is how I'm going to accomplish it. Sometimes the best thing that you can possibly do is write things out. And I'm going to take it a step further and tell you one of the best things that you could possibly do, that I will do, is have silence. A lot of times, some of the best things that we do come in silence. Some of the best ideas that we have are in moments of silence. Today I had a fantastic idea for the business that came to me while I was driving, but I didn't have any music on. I wasn't listening to any podcasts. I just had silence. I had the noise of the outside going, no radio, no nothing. And I had this idea come into my head, and I just sat there and I said to myself, feed it, feed it, feed it. Like, just cultivate this idea as it comes into your brain. And now I've got it locked in. Next thing I'm going to do is go organize it on paper. That's the best thing I could possibly do, because I need to know, how am I going to make this happen? Now, there is something, and I can tell you this just from being in the safety world for a while, because I was the corporate safety director of a company in the Philadelphia area. Anytime an accident or an incident happens, what you typically do is you start at that moment, and then you start backtracking. You reverse engineer the process. You look at it and you say, okay, this is the end state. What happened directly before that? Okay, what happened directly before that? What led to that decision? Who was involved in that decision? You reverse engineer things. And you can absolutely do the same thing. And that's where visualization also comes in, to look at the end state, look at the ideal end state and say, okay, this is what I need to do. This is what I need to make happen. But how am I going to do that? Well, in order for that to happen, this has got to happen. Now I'm writing it out. In order for that to happen, this needs to happen. Now I'm writing it out. So you're always backtracking until you get from your objective to where you currently are. So for me to be able to move forward another step in that direction, I need to accomplish this. Well, that's easy. I do this, boom, I'm done. Now I'm through that step. Organize your thoughts, write everything out, because when you can see it on paper, it's so much more manageable. I remember when I started becoming a pilot, and I would look at the interior of the cockpit of the helicopter, and there was just so many buttons. There's so many buttons that it just, I couldn't wrap my head around it. I'm like, man, how does anybody control all this stuff? And there's helicopters that are a lot more sophisticated than the one that I fly, but there's so many buttons, there's so many circuit breakers, there's so many switches. It just seemed like a lot. But the more I was exposed to it, the more time I spent in that environment, the smaller that world became. So in the beginning, yes, that cockpit with all the buttons and switches and circuit breakers looked like this. But today, it looks like this. If you ask me where a switch is, I instantly know. It's right here. It's right here. Here's this radio. There's this. It's so much easier to jump around because of my amount of time that I've been exposed to it. And that's what you need, exposure to your idea. And a lot of times the best way to do that is to actually see it written out. So keep in mind, set your goals, write your goals out, visualize, now feed the process, write things out, get your thoughts organized, okay? That's one of the best things that you can possibly do. And now you're just checking things off. You've made this idea that seemed like, how am I going to get to this end state, so much more manageable, because now you can see it. You can see what you need to do. You can see the steps that you need to take to be able to get to that without your mind going in 20,000 different directions because it doesn't know where to focus. Focus. Take control of your brain. Say, stop going down this way, stop going down that way. This is where we need to go, here and here only. And once we accomplish this, then we can go on to that step. Then we can start worrying about this. Then we can start worrying about that. But until you get to that point or you overcome the step prior to that, you should not be worrying about that. But you will never know what steps you need to take first or last unless you have some level of organization. This is just my thoughts on the situation, okay? This is what I do, that I'm growing in, that I'm learning more and more, that if you put these things into place, I do believe that affirmations and writing out your goals daily is helpful. I do believe that sitting there twice a day for 15 minutes and meditating on what you want, really putting your mind to it and saying, wow, that's where I need to be. This is where I am. What needs to occur in between here and there? That helps by visualizing, because now I'm reminding myself daily. I'm seeing these pictures in my head of that version of me that's already there, and I know that I can get there. Now, I've written a book in the past. I've written 3 books in the past, but I didn't know anything when I started about writing books. I didn't know anything, and people even come to me and they say, what do I need to do? How do I come up with this information? I'm like, well, the most important thing that you need to do when you're writing a book is put the content out. Like, write it. Just get on Word, create a Word document, create a Google Doc, and just start writing. Like, get the information out of your head, get it on paper. Don't worry about the editing, don't worry about the publishing, don't worry about this, that, the cover art, don't worry about all of that. Like, you'll focus on that when the time comes. The biggest thing that you need to do is get the information out, and that's what a lot of people don't understand about writing a book, is just get it out of your head, get it onto the paper. There are professionals in place that will say, give me what you have and we'll take it from here. They'll edit, they'll publish, they'll work on corrections, they'll work on marketing, they'll work on the cover art if you need them to do that. Although you can freelance a lot of that information or a lot of those tasks. So all I'm saying is, if you need to focus on your objectives and know what action to take, and you need to get organized in those things, there are very key tasks, specific key tasks that you need to focus on. And again, goals, visualization, organization, and just start acting. Just start doing, going to it. And every time you finish, come back to the drawing board. How can we do this? Elon Musk, when he was building these rockets that were taking products up into space, when he was building these rockets, he would look at it and say, we can shed weight here, we can shed weight there, we can trim this area back a little bit, we can increase this amount more, we can reduce the amount of this more to give it better thrust. Like, he was always going back to the drawing board, and that's what people do. You can't give up. You can't face obstacles and capitulate. You have to look at these obstacles and you have to say, there's a way around them. If they can do it, I can do it. I just have to figure out what that way is. Don't give up on yourself. It's possible. It's always possible to accomplish things. You just have to stick with it. And being through what I've been through, what I read these companies have been through, all these large multi-million to billion-dollar companies who everyone says are very successful today, they didn't always start that way. They weren't always that way. And a lot of the time that it took to get them there was frustration, setbacks, bankruptcies, you name it. They went through 1,000 different things to be where they are today. But one thing they did not do was they did not lose focus. They did not take their eye off the prize. They might have had to play a little bit of Frogger and just be dodging one obstacle after another and maneuvering and correcting and coming back to the drawing board, but they stuck with it. And you can too.